Listen, I was happy to let the young cat win.
First thing I did was I got down on one knee and I paid homage to Usain.
They get better through the rounds, but it didn't come together, and that's what killed.
And he would check me out and tell me like, oh, you're good, or now you need to do this or whatever.
On August 5th, 2017, more than 50,000 fans packed London's Olympic Stadium, while millions watched from around the world. Every ticket had been purchased for one reason. Usain Bolt was about to run the final individual race of his legendary career. After years of rewriting the record books and dominating the world's biggest stages, everyone expected the greatest sprinter in history to deliver one last unforgettable victory before saying goodbye to the sport he had transformed. As the runners settled into their starting blocks, the atmosphere was filled with anticipation. The starting gun fired, and 8 of the fastest men on Earth exploded down the track. Justin Gatlin produced a brilliant start, while Bolt gradually began closing the gap in his trademark fashion. For a few breathtaking seconds, it seemed the perfect farewell was unfolding exactly as the world had imagined. Then the finish line delivered a result almost nobody had expected. Justin Gatlin crossed the line first. Young American Christian Coleman finished second. Usain Bolt crossed in third, bringing his remarkable individual career to an unexpected end. For a brief moment, the stadium fell silent as spectators tried to process what they had just witnessed. Then, the silence gave way to something even more astonishing. Instead of celebrating the new world champion, thousands of fans loudly booed the winner, creating one of the most unforgettable scenes in the history of track and field. Yet Gatlin did not respond with anger or celebration. Instead, he walked toward Bolt, lowered his head, and bowed before the man who had defined an entire generation of sprinting. It was a moment of humility that surprised even his harshest critics, and revealed that this story was far more complicated than a simple battle between hero and villain. How had an Olympic champion become the most hated man in athletics? Why did millions refuse to forgive him, even after he fought his way back to the top? To answer those questions, the story had to return to the beginning, long before the boos, the controversy, and the rivalry that shaped Justin Gatlin's legacy. Long before the world knew Justin Gatlin as one of the most controversial figures in athletics, he was simply a gifted young boy with extraordinary speed. Born in Brooklyn, New York, and later raised in Pensacola, Florida, Gatlin displayed exceptional athletic ability from an early age. While other children were still discovering their interests, he was already standing out in school competitions with a level of acceleration that separated him from nearly everyone around him. It did not take long for coaches to recognize that they were looking at a rare talent whose potential reached far beyond local track meets. As Gatlin entered high school and later joined the University of Tennessee, his natural ability continued to flourish under professional coaching. Training refined the raw speed that had once come so effortlessly, while his explosive starts and powerful sprinting mechanics quickly made him one of the most feared young athletes in collegiate track and field. His performances consistently placed him among the nation's elite, convincing coaches and selectors that he possessed the qualities needed to compete against the very best sprinters in the world. With every race, his confidence grew, and so did the expectations surrounding his future. Those expectations soon became reality. Gatlin earned his place on the United States national team and arrived at the 2004 Olympic Games in Athens with the opportunity of a lifetime. Competing against the fastest athletes on the planet, he remained composed under immense pressure and produced the performance of his career. Crossing the finish line first in the men's 100-meter final, Justin Gatlin became Olympic champion at just 22 years of age. Overnight, he transformed from a promising young sprinter into America's newest sporting hero, carrying the hopes of a nation eager to reclaim sprinting supremacy. The Olympic title proved that Athens had not been a lucky breakthrough, but the arrival of a genuine superstar. Gatlin continued collecting medals on the international stage, including World Championship success that strengthened his reputation as one of the fastest men alive. His consistency, explosive power, and competitive mindset convinced many experts that he was entering the prime years of a career capable of defining an entire generation. Every victory reinforced the belief that American sprinting had finally found the athlete who could dominate the sport for years to come. Success brought opportunities beyond the track. Sponsors eagerly associated their brands with the young champion. Media outlets celebrated him as the future of American athletics, and fans embraced him as the country's next great sprint icon. Justin Gatlin appeared to have everything an athlete could dream of: Olympic glory, worldwide recognition, financial success, and a career that seemed destined for even greater achievements. Looking back, it is almost impossible to believe that this remarkable rise stood only moments away from an equally dramatic collapse that would change both his life and his legacy forever. Justin Gatlin's remarkable rise appeared unstoppable, but the first serious challenge to his reputation arrived even before he became an Olympic champion. In 2001, while competing as a college athlete, Gatlin tested positive for amphetamines. The result initially threatened to derail his promising career before it had truly begun. However, the investigation revealed that the substance came from medication he had been prescribed since childhood to treat attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Because the medication had been legitimately prescribed and the circumstances were considered mitigating, the lengthy suspension was reduced after arbitration. Although the incident damaged his reputation, Gatlin returned to competition determined to prove that his success would be defined by his performances on the track rather than by an early mistake. His comeback from that setback seemed complete as Olympic gold, World Championship medals, and international recognition followed. Yet only a few years later, his career faced a far more devastating crisis. In 2006, Gatlin tested positive for testosterone, a banned performance-enhancing substance. Unlike the earlier case, this result triggered worldwide controversy almost instantly. Gatlin maintained that he had never knowingly used the substance and argued that the positive test resulted from the actions of his massage therapist. Regardless of those claims, anti-doping authorities held him responsible under the rules governing elite sport. After negotiations and legal proceedings, the original 8-year suspension was reduced to 4 years because he had cooperated with investigators. The consequences were immediate and brutal. Headlines that had once celebrated an Olympic champion now described him as a disgraced athlete. Television discussions focused less on his achievements and more on the failed drug test that threatened to overshadow everything he had accomplished. Sponsors quickly ended their partnerships, unwilling to associate their brands with an athlete surrounded by controversy. Fans who had once proudly celebrated his victories turned away, while critics argued that his legacy had been permanently destroyed. Within weeks, Justin Gatlin had gone from representing the future of American sprinting to becoming one of the sport's most controversial figures. The suspension removed him from competition during what should have been the prime years of his career. Every major championship passed without him, while new stars emerged to capture the world's attention. Outside the stadiums, many observers assumed they had already seen the last chapter of Justin Gatlin's story. Few athletes had ever returned to elite sprinting after such a lengthy absence, and even fewer had managed to rebuild their public image. To many people, retirement appeared to be the only realistic outcome. His name slowly disappeared from conversations about the fastest men in the world, replaced by a new generation that seemed ready to leave him behind forever. For Gatlin, the hardest battle was no longer against other sprinters, but against uncertainty itself. Every day forced him to confront the possibility that his greatest achievements had already become meaningless in the eyes of the public. The criticism never seemed to fade, and the weight of global judgment followed him long after the headlines had moved on. Yet beneath the disappointment and isolation, another determination quietly began to grow. While much of the sporting world believed Justin Gatlin's career had reached its final chapter, he had already made a decision that almost nobody expected. He would return to the track no matter how impossible that journey appeared, and attempt one of the most extraordinary comebacks modern athletics had ever witnessed. For many athletes, a suspension of several years would have marked the end of a professional career. Sprinting is a sport where fractions of a second separate champions from the rest, and losing 4 years during an athlete's physical prime often leaves little hope of returning to the highest level. Justin Gatlin understood that reality better than anyone, yet retirement was never the option he chose. Instead of accepting that his story had already been written, he committed himself to rebuilding every part of his life. The challenge before him extended far beyond becoming physically fast again. He also had to restore the discipline, confidence, and purpose that had been buried beneath years of controversy and public condemnation. During that difficult period, Gatlin found stability through the United States Army World Class Athlete Program, an initiative designed to help elite American athletes continue training while serving the country through military affiliation. The program gave him access to experienced coaches, world-class training facilities, sports science support, and a structured environment built around discipline and accountability. More importantly, it gave him something he had been missing since his suspension began: a clear direction. While the outside world continued to define him by past mistakes, his daily routine shifted towards steady improvement rather than public opinion. Every session became another opportunity to rebuild the athlete many believed no longer existed. The work itself was relentless. Every morning began with technical drills designed to sharpen his reaction time and improve the efficiency of each stride, leaving the starting blocks. Hours were spent developing explosive power through Olympic lifting, sprint-specific strength exercises, resisted acceleration work, and carefully monitored speed sessions. Recovery became just as important as training, with stretching, physiotherapy, massage, and proper sleep forming essential parts of the process. Nutrition was planned with equal precision, ensuring that every meal supported performance and recovery. Nothing about the comeback relied on shortcuts. It demanded patience, repetition, and an unwavering commitment to gradual improvement day after day. Physical preparation, however, proved easier than overcoming the psychological burden that followed him everywhere. Gatlin trained knowing that even if he reached the top again, many fans would never separate the athlete from the mistakes that had defined his reputation. Every interview risked reopening old controversies. Every race invited fresh criticism. Every success was questioned by people unwilling to believe that redemption could ever be genuine. Carrying that weight required a different kind of strength, one that could not be measured with stopwatches or medals. He had to learn how to remain focused despite knowing that public acceptance might never return, regardless of how honestly he competed. As the years passed, Gatlin's motivation gradually evolved. Winning medals remained important, but the comeback became about something much deeper than standing on podiums. It became a determination to prove that one chapter, no matter how damaging, should not define an entire life. He wanted the opportunity to compete again, to test himself against the fastest athletes in the world, and to show that perseverance could survive even the harshest criticism. Quietly and almost unnoticed, the former Olympic champion was rebuilding himself while the sporting world looked elsewhere. During those same years, thousands of miles away in Jamaica, another extraordinary sprinter was capturing global attention, breaking records, and beginning a reign that would completely transform the history of athletics. While Justin Gatlin fought to rebuild his career away from the spotlight, the center of sprinting quietly shifted across the Caribbean to Jamaica. There, a young athlete named Usain Bolt was beginning a journey that would change the sport forever. Even as a teenager, Bolt had displayed extraordinary talent, becoming the first junior athlete to win a World Championship gold medal in the 200 meters. His unusual height for a sprinter initially led some experts to question whether he could ever dominate the 100 meters. Instead, he turned that supposed weakness into an advantage, combining remarkable stride length with explosive speed in a way the sport had never witnessed before. Bolt's breakthrough transformed athletics almost overnight. At the 2008 Beijing Olympics, he stunned the world by winning the 100-meter final in world record time, then broke another world record in the 200 meters only days later. A year afterward, at the World Championships in Berlin, he pushed the limits even further by setting astonishing new world records in both events, performances that still stand among the greatest achievements in sporting history. Yet Bolt's greatness extended far beyond the stopwatch. His confidence, joyful celebrations, and effortless charisma attracted millions of new fans, making track and field more popular than it had been in decades. With every Olympic title and every World Championship victory, Bolt became much more than an exceptional athlete. He became the face of modern athletics. Crowds packed stadiums, hoping to witness another unforgettable performance. Sponsors competed to work alongside him, and children around the world copied his signature celebration. Bolt represented everything the sport wanted to showcase: speed, entertainment, humility and victory, and a personality that connected naturally with audiences across different cultures. At the same time, Justin Gatlin continued carrying the burden of a reputation many believed could never be repaired. One man inspired admiration wherever he competed, while the other continued facing skepticism before every race even began. By the time Gatlin completed his suspension and earned his return to elite competition, sprinting had a new king. The path back to the top was no longer simply about proving he still belonged among the world's fastest athletes. It now required defeating the greatest sprinter the sport had ever produced. Every championship from that moment forward carried a deeper meaning than medals alone. It became a collision between two extraordinary careers, two completely different public images, and two men whose legacies would become permanently linked through one of the defining rivalries in the history of athletics. Justin Gatlin's return to elite competition was greeted with mixed emotions. Some admired his determination to rebuild a career that many believed had ended forever, while others insisted he should never have been welcomed back. Regardless of public opinion, his performances quickly proved that he remained one of the fastest men in the world. By the time the 2013 World Championships arrived in Moscow, Gatlin had earned another opportunity to challenge for the sport's biggest prizes. Waiting for him, however, was Usain Bolt, an athlete who had transformed dominance into routine. Their first major championship meeting after Gatlin's return immediately captured global attention because it represented far more than a race for gold. It became a collision between redemption and greatness. Their rivalry fascinated audiences because both men relied on completely different strengths. Gatlin built his races around explosive reaction times and powerful acceleration, often reaching top speed before anyone else had settled into their rhythm. Bolt, by contrast, sometimes surrendered valuable ground during the opening meters before unleashing an extraordinary top speed that few athletes in history had ever matched. Each meeting followed a familiar pattern. Gatlin would surge ahead early, forcing Bolt into an aggressive chase that pushed the Jamaican champion closer to his limits than most of his rivals ever managed. Every race became a tactical contest in which fractions of a second determined whether an explosive start or a devastating finish would prevail. As the rivalry continued, the pressure surrounding each championship only intensified. To Bolt's supporters, every victory strengthened the legacy of the greatest sprinter the world had ever seen. To Gatlin supporters, every strong performance represented another step in one of sport's most remarkable comebacks. The contrast between the two athletes extended far beyond the track. Bolt entered stadiums to thunderous applause, while Gatlin often faced boos before the race had even begun. Yet, neither reaction altered what happened once the starting gun fired. Inside those 10 seconds, reputation, popularity, and public opinion disappeared, leaving only two extraordinary sprinters fighting for the same finish line. Their greatest battle unfolded at the 2015 World Championships in Beijing. Gatlin arrived in exceptional form after producing some of the fastest times of the season, leading many experts to believe that Bolt's reign was finally under serious threat. When the race began, Gatlin executed another brilliant start, and immediately gained a slight advantage. Bolt responded exactly as he had so many times before, gradually increasing his speed with every stride until the two champions were almost inseparable. As they approached the finish, neither man appeared willing to surrender even the smallest fraction of a second. Bolt leaned across the line first, defeating Gatlin by just 1/100th of a second. It remains one of the closest and most dramatic 100-meter finals ever contested, proving once again how narrow the difference between victory and defeat could be. The rivalry continued into the 2016 Olympic Games in Rio de Janeiro, where Bolt sought to complete an unprecedented third consecutive Olympic sweep of the sprint events. Gatlin once again stood in his path, carrying the hopes of proving that persistence could finally overcome history. Although Bolt successfully defended his Olympic title, Gatlin claimed the silver medal and demonstrated that his comeback had exceeded almost every expectation. Years after, many believed his career had ended. He remained the only sprinter capable of consistently pushing Bolt on the sport's biggest stages. As another season approached, attention shifted towards the 2017 World Championships in London. It would be Bolt's final individual race, and the world expected the greatest farewell the sport had ever witnessed. Few imagined that Justin Gatlin was about to write a very different ending. By the time the 2017 World Championships arrived in London, the race carried a meaning that extended far beyond the medals. For Usain Bolt, it was the final individual appearance of a career that had inspired millions and transformed athletics forever. For Justin Gatlin, it represented the opportunity he had spent years chasing through relentless training, public criticism, and repeated disappointments. When the starting gun fired, Bolt once again found himself trying to recover from a slower start, but this time, Gatlin refused to surrender the advantage. He maintained his rhythm through the closing meters and crossed the finish line first, finally defeating the greatest sprinter in history on the sport's biggest stage. It should have been the defining celebration of Gatlin's career. Instead, the new world champion was met with loud boos from sections of the crowd who had hoped to witness Bolt's perfect farewell. The contrast was impossible to ignore. A man who had climbed back to the top after years of adversity stood victorious, yet the moment was overshadowed by the reputation he had carried since returning to competition. The gold medal around his neck confirmed that he had conquered the fastest field in the world, but it could not erase the judgment that many fans continued to hold against him. Rather than responding with frustration, Gatlin chose humility. He walked directly toward Bolt, lowered his head, and bowed before the champion who had defined an era of sprinting. The gesture acknowledged not only Bolt's extraordinary achievements, but also the respect that had always existed between the two rivals despite the narrative created around them. Bolt accepted the moment with grace, and in the days that followed, he reminded reporters that Gatlin had served his suspension and earned the right to compete again under the rules of the sport. It was a powerful statement from the greatest athlete of the generation, even if it failed to change every opinion. Justin Gatlin had finally achieved the comeback that almost nobody believed was possible. He had returned from suspension, rebuilt his career, and defeated the greatest sprinter the world had ever seen. Yet his greatest victory also exposed an uncomfortable truth. Success could restore titles, records, and respect among fellow athletes, but it could not guarantee forgiveness from the public. That lingering question became the true ending of his journey and raised a debate that continues long after the finish line. Can redemption ever outweigh a past mistake, or are some reputations destined to last forever? Justin Gatlin's career became one of athletics' most debated journeys. He reached the highest peak as an Olympic champion, suffered one of the sport's biggest falls through doping violations, and later completed a comeback that few believed was possible. There is no denying that Gatlin broke the rules, and those actions carried serious consequences. He lost titles, served lengthy suspensions, damaged his reputation, and spent years trying to regain the trust of both the sport and its fans. Yet another part of the story cannot be ignored. He accepted the punishments imposed under anti-doping regulations, returned only after becoming eligible again, and rebuilt his career through years of disciplined training within the rules of international competition. That is why opinions remain deeply divided. Some believe his achievements after returning prove that redemption is possible. Others argue that certain mistakes leave scars that no amount of success can ever erase. Perhaps there is no single correct answer. Maybe that is why the image of Justin Gatlin bowing before Usain Bolt remains so unforgettable, because history often remembers moments very differently than the people who lived them.